Hi everyone, this is Tim. Welcome to North and South Podcasts. This podcast is about the Blitz of Liverpool, particularly Bootle, where I am from. And this refers to the bombing of the city in 1941 until May 1941. I'm going to start with a video clip which you're going to just hear the audio of me a couple of years ago at the site of a bomb shelter that took a direct hit in Liverpool and resulted in death of many people. I'll explain more about that in a minute, but Bootle took a lot of bombs during World War II. So here's the story of that. This is Tim. I am on the corner of Stanley Road and Ash Street. Need to check if it is Ash Street or Ash Road. And this is the memorial for the citizens of the borough who lost their lives while sheltering close to this spot during an air raid in May 1941. So apparently dozens of people were killed at this spot, quite close to here. Many of the bodies were taken to another place that was also set on fire by an incendiary bomb, and many more corpses were burned there. And this is the memorial. So there's a wreath underneath here. Dear Taken Roof volunteers, thank you for all your hard work and time helping to keep the memory of those who lost their lives in Bootle World War II. We'll never forget. And there's a wreath there. And this is the stone, Ash Street, War Grave Memorial. Memory of those citizens who lost their lives in May 41. So this was the site of a particularly bad direct hit on a shelter. There were many across the city. The worst though was the one in Darnell Street or Road. Again, sorry, I can't remember. It's actually Durning Road, my apologies. Which is in Edgehill, and I'm hoping to take a little bit of a clip there. But the garden is here, and it's easy to forget about the destruction and what went on over these skies and on these streets, 70, 80 years ago now, and to think of what it was like. And I've spoken to my Uncle Frank, who said there was lots of war damage in some of the streets down there. That's where my uncle and my dad were born and grew up, about 4 blocks that way, the other side of Bootle Strand. Bootle is a deprived area. There's lots of civil service jobs in Bootle. It's one of the key industries in the area. It's got a nice little centre, the Strand shopping centre there, getting a bit of life back. And that place, my dad helped to build that when he was a kid as well. But this memorial here, a beautiful little reminder of what happened here. So tragic, but also how things are quickly forgotten, and how this generation, the war generation, are gone, and people today haven't got that lived experience. And I remember when my nan, when she had dementia when she was older, she used to refer to the Blitz and the air raid sirens and stuff, and that she could remember that, because you remember those things that are stressful in later life. Those things come back to you. So beautiful little memorial, and let's remember what happened here and about the absurdity of that war, how ridiculous it was, and all the people whose lives were changed. My granddad, 5 years fighting abroad, from 20 to 25, and all those who lost their lives. So very fit memorial. This next section is an interview I did with my grandmother, Elizabeth Clarke, and we talk about the Blitz in Bootle that she was an eyewitness to. And we also talk about a couple of other things to do with the depression and hardship. A little bit about watching Dixie Dean, the famous Everton striker, playing football, and jobs that her mum and dad did, and what she remembers of growing up. It's mainly focused on the Blitz, so I'm just going to play you this little clip, and then I'll come back later and do some analysis. She died about 2 years after this in 2016, and I recorded on a cassette tape an interview with me nan and granddad. My granddad died in 2005 on my mum's side, and the tape chewed up, and it was lost, so I'm not aware of any recordings of my granddad talking about World War II. But I managed to get 2 recordings of me nan
One of them is this one, which is mainly about the Blitz. So enjoy. She was failing a little bit, and the memory wasn't as sharp as it used to be during this interview, but I'm going to leave it all in. And you might think I'm asking her some leading questions at times, but that's because we'd already discussed what we were going to talk about. Maybe she forgot a few things, so bear with it. But I think it's important history.
So, sorry, what was it like in the air raid shelter? You had 8 of you in the air raid shelter, and you were in the back garden. Right, okay. And did your house ever get hit? Did you ever have anyone there you get hit?
Quite near us did, around. You just missed sometimes, and we were pretty lucky.
Did you see any houses that had been hit by bombs nearby?
Yeah.
And what were they like? Did anyone die or?
Oh yes, people died.
Did they? Yeah.
Yeah. And they hit the house, you see, and it would go off, the roof would go off, all the things. Oh, it was all that, yeah.
Yeah. And did they have air raid wardens in the streets?
Yeah.
And did they make sure that the windows were blacked out?
Oh yeah, they had to done that, yeah.
They did?
But we had to black our own as well.
Yeah.
We blacked our own.
And did they knock at the door if it wasn't blacked out?
Probably, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And did you see any soldiers? Were there any soldiers on the streets or?
I wouldn't think so. They were in army, but some of them were stationed in Seaport and just down the road in different places. They got put in other halls and places.
I see. And did the air raid wardens, did they have guns or anything like that? The air raid wardens?
I think they did carry them to them.
Yeah. Did they shoot?
They were only men, weren't they? Who were, you know, watching what was getting done.
And did they shoot at the planes or did they just?
I don't think so,
No.
but we did have someone shooting at the German planes, I mean.
Yeah. Did you see anyone shooting at the planes or?
No, but if we did, it'd be up and.
Yeah.
But and if it hit the planes, it'd come down, wouldn't it?
Did you see any of the balloons in the sky, the barrage balloons, or did they have balloons in the sky?
Yeah, and they had balloons, yeah.
Yeah, and were they trying to hit the planes or?
Well, yeah, but it's more out on different land to shoot them down.
Right, I see. And they had guns shooting up at the aeroplanes as well, did they?
Yeah.
Could you hear them?
Well, you wouldn't be quite near down there to up there, but they would go far, wouldn't they, you know.
And you had a rationing book, did you say before?
Yeah.
Okay, and did you feel that you had enough to eat then, did you, yeah?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
you managed.
You managed?
But somehow, you did have enough, because we never had bloody much before the war.
So, during the war, did you work somewhere? Didn't you work in a factory?
Yeah, I worked in the packing case. We used to make cases for the army.
Did you?
Whatever they put in them, guns, and they got packed away. Like onion cases, but square, which is, you could see through, you know. Yeah. All right.
And did you work in any factories during the war, or were you making suitcases? Did you make any bombs or artillery or anything like that?
A bomb factory in Kirby.
You worked in a bomb factory in Kirby, yeah?
Yeah.
And what, did you have to work long hours, or was it?
Well, we were on shift work, you know, 7 till 3 and 3 till 10. Unless the sirens went, we all had to come out. And
go into the air raid shelters.
Yeah.
And how did people feel during the war? Did everyone pull together?
Oh, I think so, yeah. Nobody was out of church, no.
Did all the people want to win the war against the Germans, or?
We wanted us to win the war. Oh, of course.
So everyone felt that they were doing their bit.
And then all the lads were going away then. They were all getting out to fight, weren't they?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And after the war, what was it like after the war? Was there a lot of damage in Liverpool?
Oh, yeah. There's lots of good buildings being beat, you know. And
Yeah. And did you have a job after the war? Did you work anywhere after the war?
I was back in the packing case now.
Oh, right. And
I worked there before and after. Yeah. I was back there. And then I worked in the Armaments Factory as well, you know.
Oh, yeah.
The Royal Ordnance Factory.
And what did you make there?
I think it was primers for the
The bombs or?
yeah, not the big bombs, whatever.
Yeah.
And
What was it like working in the factory? Did you enjoy it, or did you just get on with it, or?
I just got on with it.
Yeah.
But we knew that if the sirens went, we'd have to get down or whatever, and things like that.
Yeah.
We had to do all that.
Good stuff. So
we were there when they were shooting down because the sirens would go for us to get out, get somewhere else.
what was it like after the war? Was it better in Britain after the war, or? Because we had the Labour government.
It took a little while, but it managed to come through. Yeah. And then it was sort of, well, it's years now, isn't it? But it took over again, you know.
And what did you think of the government after the war, the Labour government? Clement Attlee and the NHS, the National Health Service.
Yeah.
Do you remember that? Did that make a difference?
Oh yeah, all that. And then we had to go, we had shelters in our backyard as well to go down, what do you call them ones?
The air raid shelters?
Yeah.
Were they the Anderson shelters?
Yeah.
Did you ever have a Morrison shelter in the kitchen, one of the little cage ones, or did you not have that?
We didn't. They may have had them somewhere, I didn't see one.
And
we had to stay in the house and hide down, or go down the cellars underground all the time, you know.
Yeah. And what was it like? What was it like during the Depression? Because you grew up in the 30s, didn't you? And it was, the country was quite poor, wasn't it?
Yeah, for 20, when was I born? 22.
You were born in 22, yeah.
And 30, I was only 8.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't be thrown too much into anything unless they were hiding you know.
Yeah. So were you quite poor when you were young, your family? Because you grew up during the Depression, didn't you? Was it hard when you were growing up?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Do you mean with the war?
No, just before the war. You know when the Depression.
It was hard too.
Yeah, it was hard.
A lot of us didn't have money.
Yeah.
Like very little.
Yeah.
Took you all the time to get something to eat.
Did it? And what did your dad do? What was your dad's job?
He was in the bomb, not the bombs themselves. You know the men who air raid wardens.
Oh yeah.
Things, all that sort of thing.
Right. And what was his job before the war? Your dad? Did he have a job before the war? Do you remember what?
Similar to that.
Yeah. And what about your mum? Did your mum have a job?
Yeah, she worked in the ROA.
Oh, and then you worked there as well?
Yeah.
Right.
But we were on different shifts.
Right. And when did you first go and see Everton?
Not too long ago, for all that. In the first days, you wouldn't be able to go, you didn't have money.
Oh, I see. Yeah. You didn't have the money.
And some of the matters. It might have been a bit cheaper then as well, Tim, you know.
Were Everton on the wireless when you were younger?
Yeah.
You'd listen to them on the wireless, yeah?
Yeah. You'd listen to the matches, and the wireless would be on in your kitchen. You'd listen to them in the kitchen.
And who was your favourite player? Do you remember who your favourite player was when you were younger?
Dixie Dean.
Dixie Dean. And what was Dixie Dean like?
What was he like? Well, he looked a bit tough looking, well made, bit plumpish for fish.
Yeah.
You know. Oh, aye.
Good stuff. So have you been enjoying watching the World Cup?
This year, you mean, Tim? I haven't seen much of it this year. I used to always look, but just lately I haven't been there. We haven't seen much lately, have we?
No. All right. Well, listen, thanks very much, because I just wanted to record this.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks very much, Nan. This is Elizabeth Clarke.
In the queue, in the bread shop and things like that. Something you could get, another thing, and
so sometimes it was difficult getting food, was it?
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Well, thanks very much, Nan.
Okay.
Okay. Bye.
Yeah.
Quite emotional for me to listen to that now from my late grandmother, and to think about all those memories which can be lost in a couple of generations, really. So I wanted to leave that in its entirety, but I'm going to speak further about the Blitz now. And the word Blitz comes from Blitzkrieg, which is the German for lightning war, which refers to the German attack. strategy used so successfully in the first few years of the Second World War, when a German army faced another army with similar terrain, similar equipment. They came out on top generally because of their ambitious attempts to bomb, use tanks and assault troops on the ground, use paratroopers beforehand, and then get in and try to outflank the enemies, cut supply lines. It was about the coordination really of technology, communication, and it was extremely risky at times, but it tended to come off against other armies that just weren't that well trained and couldn't deal with it. The Battle of Britain, if you watch a film like Dunkirk, which has brought this to the fore recently, there was lots of air fighting over Britain, the Battle of Britain in 1940, where it was clear that the German army wasn't going to gain ascendancy over the skies of Britain because the British Royal Air Force was able to get fuel, go up and attack fairly close to home, whereas the Germans had to travel across the English Channel. And I believe the success rate and the survival rate of your first mission in the Battle of Britain from an RAF standpoint was 50%. So there was a 50% chance of you being killed in your first battle, because all the theory is one thing, but actually being up in the skies with an enemy trying to kill you is another thing entirely. But the British came out on top during the Battle of Britain, the British Empire and Allies working together, and basically after that the Germans resorted to the bombing of British cities to try and affect A, morale, B, industry, and C, the ability to sustain the war effort. You had the Battle of the Atlantic going on, which meant that the German U-boats were trying to starve Britain into submission as well. America hadn't joined the war yet, and it was not a good time. Many people say now that the British were always going to win with the resources of the empire, but the way that the German army was taking over country after country after country, it certainly wasn't an easy thing to predict, a British victory or an Allied victory. The big problem for the Germans was when Hitler decided foolishly to invade the Soviet Union in 1941, and that's when the Blitz kind of ended, and the planes that were used to bomb Britain in 40 and 41 were sent elsewhere. About 4,000 people died in Liverpool during the Blitz, and it was second only to London. And Bootle sustained more damage for a small area than anywhere else in the United Kingdom. And Bootle only gets one mention in the official war history, which is something I heard in the early 90s by a local historian, which is interesting because it, very London-centric kind of officialdom. We've still got that today, haven't we, in terms of how the country is run culturally, economically, socially and politically. But Liverpool was a port, and Liverpool was important because a lot of equipment, food, supplies and later men were coming into Liverpool from across the Atlantic, and 11 miles of Liverpool was heavily bombed. So Liverpool, Bootle and also Wallasey on the other side of the River Mersey. The River Mersey is very narrow towards the end but goes very wide once you go down into it. And one of the reasons why it's such a good deep water port is because the thin opening at the mouth of the river creates pressure, which means that a lot of the sand and silt is cleared from the bottom, and it means that it's a very good deep water port, which is why Liverpool was such a successful city and considered by many the second city of the empire. It was also a key part of the slave trade and the cotton trade with the Americas, going back over hundreds of years. 90% of war material came through Liverpool, and we're talking about 75 million tonnes of equipment. That may be annually, I'll have to check that. But there was lots of industry here in Liverpool too. And in August 1940 there were 50 raids on 3 nights. Some of them were quite light raids. 300 planes were involved, sometimes in 10-hour bombing raids. In Walton Jail, which isn't too far from my house, people were killed. And on the 28th of November 1940, there was a terrible disaster at Edge Hill, which I alluded to earlier on in the video, although you only heard the audio, where it was at a bomb shelter that took a direct hit in Bootle. There was a terrible disaster where about 200 were killed at Durning Road shelter in Edge Hill. But there were loads more killed as well. The bomb at Durning was effectively a landmine that was attached to a parachute that went down a very small opening. And more exactly, there was 166 killed. There were 300 in there in total. And there was actually a college on top as well. And the injuries to survivors was absolutely terrible because there was boiling water from the pipes, which also spilled on many of the survivors. And Churchill referred to it as one of the single worst incidents of the war. There was a woman who lost 4 kids, and the body parts were so charred that one man only got a watch back from his uncle that they were unable to identify or differentiate between the victims because of the severity of the hit on the Durning bomb shelter. December 20th to the 22nd of 1940 was when the Xmas Blitz occurred, and that was when it was at its peak. 365 were killed, many shelters were hit. We had 42 killed, 40 killed, 74 killed. And then it went fairly quiet until May 41, and the worst of this was the 1st to the 7th, when 69 out of 144 cargo boats in the port were out of action because of the bombing, and there were nearly 3,000 casualties. So this was a serious part of the total war that was occurring at the time. 681 bombers were involved, and one ship exploded with 1,000 tons of bombs on. 4 were killed. Pieces were found a mile away. Huskerson Dock was also damaged in Liverpool, and there were 6,500 demolished houses, 190,000 damaged houses, and 70,000 people were homeless by the end of the Blitz. Also utilities, the provision of utilities and much infrastructure was destroyed. It's hard for us to imagine what it was like, although my Uncle Frank said in an earlier podcast that there was debris left for years, decades after the war, because there was a shortage of money to pay for all the repairs. Near the Co-op shop, there was an air raid, as I mentioned earlier, on Ash Street, just off Stanley Road, which is the main road in Bootle, and dozens were killed, as I mentioned. And after many people were killed, 180 corpses were destroyed with a direct hit on a mortuary within the next few days. And on the 5th of May, the Times said that Liverpool was being subject to the heaviest ever bombardment by an air force in Britain. Hitler then turned his attention towards the Soviet Union for his racial war in the East for ideological reasons. Then a few months after that, after some early successes, you had the United States directly involved in the war. You had Pearl Harbor, but also Hitler then declared war on the United States. And then things started to really turn because the Nazis were fighting on so many fronts. There were technological changes, Allies were working together, and then the Sixth Army was defeated at Stalingrad in the winter of 1942, 1943, and then things started to turn. But Liverpool is a city quite far northwest, and it was such a strategically important place because of the port that's why it took so much damage. There were other cities impacted, of course, including places even further north and west of that, with Docklands, etc., Glasgow and Belfast. There's a fantastic museum in Liverpool called the Western Approaches, and it's where the entire Atlantic operation was run from, and it's a museum. It's only open at certain times, but it's well worth a visit. It was opened, I think, after a certain amount of time after the war because of the Official Secrets Act. He then opened it to the public, and it's a fantastic place to go and visit if you want to learn more about the Blitz and the Battle of the Atlantic. Churchill referred to the people of the UK after the Blitz as the unconquered people, and there are memorials around Liverpool, including at the Pier Head, which is right near the Albert Dock, near the Museum of Liverpool Life, or the Liverpool Museum as it's called now, which is really good. It shows a stairwell and a child with a plane, and my nan said that often it was only the stairs that were left standing from some of the direct hits. So they've got that memorial down there. They've also got a memorial to the 30,000 people in the Merchant Navy or the Navy who went down or were killed during the Battle of the Atlantic. And also, quite quirkily, Liverpool has left one of its churches. The basic structure of the church remains, but it took a direct hit in the middle, and the centre of the church was burned out. And this is St Luke's Church at the top of Bold Street, and that church is an eternal memorial to the Blitz because it shows what happened. It destroyed buildings, and miraculously the outer shell is still there, but it took a direct hit, and that's been kept, and it's also part of Liverpool's cultural history and a part of Liverpool's wartime history as well. Very important site, well worth a visit. They do particular festivals and cultural events there. The generation who knew about the Blitz directly, that's gone, and there might still be a few who are still alive, etc. I'm sure there are, but that's going to be gone soon. It's important that we remember these things to see what war is like and how fragile life can be and how fragile civilization can be in the face of these kind of things. I was also in St John's in Canada in 2009, and I saw a picture of St Luke's Church in the museum there, and the guy who was taking me around knew a lot about it, and I went, see that church? And I told him the story of the Blitz, and he said, oh, I didn't know that, but there was a lot of trade from Liverpool with Canada as well, because it was such an important strategic port in the northwest of England. It was important militarily during war, but also economically in times of, well, during the war too, but when wars were not on, particularly such a devastating war as World War II. Also, the Beatles, a lot of the records that were brought in from the United States came into the port after the war, which influenced the Beatles, who had this kind of new American sound. A lot of the sailors brought records back, and the Beatles were exposed to that kind of stuff, and that led to the development of that kind of Beatles generation, the Beat generation, etc. There was a real Liverpool underbelly of alternative thinking, challenging cultural thinking, and the docks continued to expand and then contract and be hit quite hard. And if you've seen Boys from the Black stuff, there's some fantastic scenes of the now renovated Albert Dock, which is just silted up and derelict, and that was rebuilt in the late 80s, partly after the Toxteth riots of 1981, when the Conservative government, who at one time were thinking, let's let Liverpool just go into terminal decline, realised that there was a lot at stake there and money needed to be invested to turn round ports and places which had come into hard times. And because Liverpool was a port, there was a lot of uncertainty about work, etc. My granddad often was out of work as a docker, and in other parts of the country there was work all year round in the factories because they had an industrial and a manufacturing base. But Liverpool was hit hard after the war, and capital of culture in 2007, a lot of money's been put back into Liverpool again in recent years, but Liverpool's history is very important. important, not just for people from Liverpool, but for people from Britain, people from all over Europe, and people from all over the world. So rest in peace, Nan. Rest in peace, other people who were affected directly from the Blitz, and let's remember our history, folks, and let's make sure these stories are not forgotten. Thank you.